Three.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Hello and welcome to the Hoosier Football Tailgate right here on the Believe Network. I am the coach, Shannon Griffith. Thank you for joining me for this next 45 minutes to an hour as we talk a little bit about Indiana football as well as get into a little bit of video analysis of the Hoosiers RPO game that was so well executed this year for Indiana, paid big dividends for them. We'll talk a little bit about that in the here shortly. First and foremost, want to thank our sponsor, Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is the ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds, everything from the NBA to college basketball, with March Madness right around the corner, including the NHL and UFC. Bet Online continues to be the number one sports betting source. From everywhere, from a three-pointer to a hat trick, Bet Online has you covered with odds, stats, more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. And we also want to thank that Quick Cut Sports Analysis software for also becoming a sponsor of the Hoosier Football Tailgate here on Believe. Quick Cut is the leading provider of sports analysis software in high school, college football, and pros, and we'll utilize some of that here in a little bit as we talk about this RPO game of the Indiana Hoosiers. Again, I apologize for not being able to make it the other night. The flu bug hit the Griffith household in full swing, and my wife and myself have been out of commission for about a total of 48 hours apiece, and finally over that and out the window as we look at this new season upon us here in Indiana football. One of the things to talk about here quickly is some of the recruiting on the recruiting front. Is that a lot of these four-star recruits that Indiana has worked their way into being in the young man's top 5 or top 7 schools, they're starting to set visits in June. That's when you're going to see a lot of these kids start making these early visits in hopes of making a commitment prior to their senior seasons. As the way the recruiting calendar goes nowadays, as you see that Indiana has had some opportunities of getting some traction with some top-tiered recruits. No question this previous season had a lot to do with that, and Indiana has taken full advantage of that on getting some top-notch kids into the forefront of recruiting. Right now they have one commitment that occurred earlier back in into January. Samuel Simpson out of River Falls, Wisconsin, an offensive lineman, 6'4", 275, 3-star ranked out of the Coach Bobstead's old backyard. He committed early and is the lone commitment in this 2026 class. But coming up shortly, and already some of these have already come in. Lawrence Timmons out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's a corner. He has the likes of Pittsburgh and West Virginia on him as at present, or those are some of the top schools. Giselle Hart out of North Cross High School in Roanoke, Virginia. He's another cornerback that is on the Hoosiers list. Again, pretty tough competition. You got Penn State, Virginia Tech in that regard. And then out of Mineral City, Ohio, an offensive tackle, 6'7", 270, Ben Cogden. A 4-star recruit, big young man, 6'7". You got Miami of Florida and Penn State, as you can see. And then coming up here earlier in June, Corey Amantry, another running back out of Hazlet, Michigan, 6', 195, 4-star, very much in Indiana's viewfinder as a possible home for that young man. Henry Olinger out of Columbus, Ohio, another running back, 6'1", 210, 4-star. Boston College is another school that is heavily involved with him. Big running back, 6 foot, like I said, 6'1", 210. So a big size young man there. And King Liggins out of Brother Rice High School in Chicago, Illinois, 6'3", 255. There's also a kid out of Florida, defensive lineman that they are really high on out of the IMG Academy, as well as a quarterback, I believe, out of Texas, Brody McWhorter. Another good-sized young man out of Texas. And as you can see, this recruiting calendar is very, very lively as we go through the months here of February, March, April, then all the way up through the summer months, as it will be something that to keep an eye on for sure, as well as Coach Signetti did announce his camps for the summer on IU's campus. And going to be there in the months of June, I believe. I'll have to take a look at that. But those one-day camps are where a lot of these guys will be coming in for their true official visit. And they'll try to get themselves through a workout, things of that nature, then have an opportunity to take a look at Bloomington as a town and Indiana as a school. So the month of June will be a very important month for the class of 26. If you remember, the 2025 class was all but wrapped up for the most part heading into the season. And with these new rules and the new roster size limits and things of that nature, spots are going to be coveted. And that's going to be the one thing that will be most difficult going forward is there are no more walk-ons. Everyone essentially is on a full ride scholarship for the most part. You have 105 that you have at your disposal. That is it. And we're entering the world of collective bargaining. Yeah, Robert, it is nice to talk about football in February, especially when there's a lot going on. That's for sure. So I appreciate you being here and taking it in again. And thank you for your patronage of the Hoosier Football Tailgate. But as I was saying, with this recruiting and all the different scenarios that are involved with this right now, the 2026 class, for the most part, will be pretty much wrapped up before fall camp starts. There may be a few here and there, but the 90-95% of it will have been settled upon prior to them going into camp this fall. So interesting dynamic. You've got the new situation with the collective bargaining and how that will impact an institution somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million. How that will be divided up was to be determined, I'm assuming. We all have heard that football is probably going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 85% of those dollars, and then it will go to basketball and so forth and so on. So as you can see, a pretty big chunk of that collective bargaining stuff will go to football in order to take care of a roster size of 105 kids. So interesting times that we are entering in, and kind of our situation too is, with everything going on, you kind of got that next topic there coming up and essentially is the Big Ten and SEC joint meetings that have been going on prior to any other meetings of the major conferences, to the ire of some of those major conferences. The Big Ten and the SEC have been doing some of this here of late. I'm going to try to get down here to some of this if I can. We'll come back to that one here in a second. Here's what I was looking at. The SEC and Big Ten have been meeting here of late to talk about seating changes. I think we've all experienced this past year with buys and so forth and so on, but they are wanting to change the way the tourney is seated. And it's a way of preventing lower ranked conference champions basically from securing high seeds over better ranked teams. And I think you go into the scenario with Boise State. In that scenario, you had Arizona State that won a conference championship. I know there's a lot of dynamics here, and I'll give you my take on this here in a second. But basically, the seeding apparatus and how that would be, there's also this expansion consideration. And this is an interesting dynamic. The Big Ten and the SEC are pushing for an expanded format, potentially increasing to 14 or 16 teams. Under that model, the SEC and the Big Ten would receive multiple automatic qualifiers, ensuring more excellent representation. Interesting. I have heard that the SEC and the Big Ten want 4 automatic qualifiers into the college football playoffs. No indication of how that would all be determined. I would assume the 2 teams that would make it to the Big Ten championship would be automatics, and then the next 2 best teams, I am assuming, or those who are ranked, or however that comes out. But essentially, they want 8 of the proposed 14 or 16 spots. And I found that very interesting, especially of the word down there, ensuring more excellent representation. You can read that many different ways. They want competitive balance and conference prioritization. The proposal benefits the powerhouse conference, of course, SEC and Big Ten, ensuring that their top teams get better seeding and more automatic bids. So if you look at the Big Ten, for instance, let's just, ordinary Big Ten thought process of who are the top teams in the Big Ten. And right now, I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of just the traditional powerhouses of the Big Ten Conference, and I'm going to include Oregon in that equation. You have Oregon, Ohio State, and Michigan, and then probably Penn State in the equation. So those are your theoretical top 4 Big Ten powerhouses, okay? So they're basically wanting to secure automatic qualifiers for the top 4 teams in a conference per se. So, for instance, that would, if Alabama would have been perceived of one of the top 4 in the SEC, or Ole Miss, or however you want to look at it, they would have gotten into the playoffs because the SEC would add a total of 4 into the college football playoffs. Of course, there's going to be opposition to all this, of course, as you can imagine. Imagine with this. The critics, of course, are arguing this could diminish the access to smaller programs and reduce parity in college football. And the other conferences, AC and Big 12, would only have a limit of 2 automatic qualifiers from each of those 2 conferences. And yes, this could be seen as a power grab by the Big Ten and the SEC. There's absolutely no question about that. When you have quote unquote super conferences, you're going to want a big chunk of that money. And then the one way to ensue that is having 4 qualifiers for sure in the playoffs from each conference. Again, the original contract would not see any of this potentially come into play until 2026. Now, it could go in effect next year, especially the seeding one, with all conferences plus Notre Dame agreeing to it. So it'd be everybody would agree to it along with ESPN. So in that regard, probably the only one I can see that could essentially be in the eyes of change for this next year, being that it would be its second year under the current guidelines, would be potentially the seating changes. Expansion, all that stuff, I don't think we'll see until the next deal comes around, in which I believe is 2026. And again, ESPN, of course, will have a say in that, but they're going to want some guarantees that the top teams are getting into the playoffs, especially those that have a good demographic that's going to watch games in that regard. And this is all going to be debated in earnest here coming up. The management committee meets here shortly to go over some of this stuff and the good and the bad of this past season when it comes to the college football playoffs. The big takeaways, they said the top ranked team should be prioritized over automatic conference champion placement. The ACC and the Big 12 could be at a disadvantage in this regard, especially if they're limited to just two teams. Those type of things. But the one thing that I'm skeptical on all this is, are we getting into a round robbish type of playoff where we're going to have the commissioners deciding who are the top teams of each conference, based upon everything from production on the field, what their last 5 or 6 games are like, things of that nature, because it doesn't make any sense to me. With these automatic qualifiers and what they're asking for there. And I'm not quite sure it's much different than what we saw this year anyway, in some of that respect. But I'm sure the SEC was groaning the biggest conference that was groaning because Ole Miss got left out, and then Bama got left out. But you've got to have a governing body or a group that's going to make these selections and such, and give them the criteria to evaluate by. The one thing that I think they do way too early is give out the rankings. I think they should wait on that, because it's going to play out over the 2 or 3 weeks, and you start getting in these dynamics where a team is rated in the top 10, and for whatever reason they lose and they take a monumental drop for no apparent reason other than the name on their jersey. But when a power team loses, they only drop a couple spots. So again, you're getting into these dynamics where you're starting to play a little bit of, I'm going to tell you who the 4 are, as opposed to letting the vote be the vote and the rankings be the rankings, I guess, in some respects. So the seating change, I do think will go forward. I don't think any of the other potential suggestions or tweaks will take place until like maybe 2024, 25 at the earliest. And 25 or 26, 27 at the earliest when the new contract comes out with all that. But I found it very interesting that the Big Ten and the SEC were kind of having these meetings, and they were excluding the ACC, the Big 12, Notre Dame, and then the Group of 5. And the Group of 5 are the ones that are ultimately going to get left out of this equation. And we're really moving closer and closer to having a true Super Division I, a Group of 5 Division One that maybe has their own playoff scenarios, so forth and so on, with some of these factors because of how things are breaking out. You get the money and all those things being said, they want to shore up these top divisions of the elites, as you can say, to maximize their earning potential and not having to share the pot to too many people per se. So I do think that's an avenue that you're going to have to keep an eye on as we get through all this, moving forward into, this summer and early in the fall and such as what may be on the forefront with this as the Big Ten and the SEC want to play Big Brother and keep a lot of them at bay with that. And if you do see that, you can bet that there's going to be more defections from conferences like the ACC and the Big 12 that are going to want to get in the Big Ten or the SEC because their chances are much better in those conferences than they would be to stay in their current conference when it comes to college football playoffs and such. So interesting dynamic thing to see. We'll see what happens with all that, but who knows what all will take place. And speaking of the Big Ten, the Media Days, which was held in Indianapolis the last couple of years, which was a great venue there at the Lucas Oil Stadium. And of course, you feel for the teams that are flying from the West Coast into the Midwest, being a 3-hour differential, so forth and so on. But it was announced this past week that the Media Days this year is moving to Las Vegas in the month, I think it's the June 22nd through the 25th at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. Can't think of a better venue in Vegas, but when you look at it, you are putting a lot of teams in the 2 to 3 hour window of travel. And I'm not quite sure this was a great overall decision for the Big Ten when it comes to their full constituents. So, but it's moving to Vegas for 2025. I'm assuming they will move it back and forth now to accommodate, the West Coast teams and the East Coast teams and the Midwest teams and so forth and so on, so that not every year is somebody having to travel great distances to get to Media Days per se. But I did think that was an interesting thought process in that as well. And then the other thing that piqued my interest is, the House settlement with the NCAA that a judge in California still has yet to rule on, ratifying their agreement, is still up in the air, even though everyone is operating as if it is a done deal. Several teams have filed a letter of did a letter. Let's see if I can get that. There we go. They filed lawyers for these athletes that are maybe of walk-on stature or other sports in general, asking for an injunction. And basically, these athletes and these lawyers have given this judge, Claudia Wilkin, out in the Northern District of California, wanting to get a injunction in place about this ratification of this agreement that the House versus the NCAA has come to the conclusion of. And, the $2.75 billion in damages that will be given out to former athletes that were not allowed to partake in name, image, and likeness. I'm going to use my son as an example. He was sent a letter. He was given an amount that he would most likely get And it was one of those, if you accept this, please sign off and send back. If you don't, blah, 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 you got your avenues to go to appeal it. And it was a pretty good payday in that respect. But that's where that 2.7 comes in. And then right there, the 20.5 million is what is going back to the institutions that they're going to utilize to pay the athletes on their roster. And, what it would take for, the top running back at Indiana, how much is he going to get versus the fourth string running back at Indiana, and so forth and so on. So there's a lot of discrepancies here. We've already came out with a ruling as it pertains to Title IX. That does not apply in this statute. And from what I'm understanding, the Department of Education's letter about the potential implications of paying out money to bigger budgeted teams or teams that make money per se, let's say Indiana football versus women's lacrosse, there will be no Title IX implications with all this from what I'm understanding. The letter essentially challenges the roster size limits and some other things about this settlement and how it should go. And these kids are wanting, an injunction so they can evaluate their time and what they could potentially have in front of them from that aspect of things when it comes to the settlement. And like I said, I've already seen articles appearing about the potential of big schools, Big Ten type of schools, already facing budget issues in their departments. And the next thing up for cutting will be sports. And those sports that do not make money and are not self-sustaining are going to be the first ones that are going to be on the chopping blocks on both sides of the coin, men's and women's. Now, Indiana already did some cutting in their budget. They did not fill 25 vacant positions in the athletic department. And I think one of the deputy directors basically took a retirement package to also reduce that burden. And so there was no sports jeopardized in this year's scenario at Indiana, but that's not something that is going to be forever in stone. So I am fearful that this will ultimately result in lost opportunities at the major conference level for those sports that are not revenue generating sports. And I don't want that to be in the equation, because I'm a high believer in the opportunity for competition and for kids to have that avenue at the highest level possible. That's great. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a business decision. And if it doesn't add up for a department to carry a sport for budgetary reasons, cost of travel, everything you can think of, and it's not something that they can swallow as an athletic department, they're going to cut these sports. So you're going to see a lot of sports that are potentially on the chopping blocks, like swimming and lacrosse. And you can just go right down the line of some of these sports that may not be a revenue generating sport at one institution. And that would be a shame. If that was, that would ultimately be that dynamic. So it's something to keep a good watch on. While I don't think this injunction has any chance of being given by this judge out in California. Now, we all could be surprised by what some judge may or may not do, but at the end of the day, I think it's important and imperative that this moves forward for the NCAA's sake, because we've already stated that the other side of the coin is the NCAA would go bankrupt. There would be no NCAA, and all this would be for naught, and the money basically would go out the window, and you'd have a situation where the Wild Wild West is ultimately back in play. But I do think it'll go through. It's unfortunate for these student athletes. I understand their plight. I understand their concerns and things of that nature. But unfortunately, when you have change, there are some things that get jeopardized in it, and some of it is not in the favor of the student athlete because of cost reasons and everything. So that's going to be something to keep a watch on as well as we head through the spring months as we go. Just remember the spring game for Indiana as of now is April 19th. Now, I say that as of now because of the scenario that we're seeing throughout the country where like Matt Rule at Nebraska said he's not going to have a spring game because it basically became a free televised event, and it allowed for teams to poach players off their roster because maybe they were number 2 and not going to be a number 1 or so forth and so on. And they took a hit in that over this summer. And so there's been a lot of accusations of tampering. I saw an article today about that exact debate on tampering, and it really has nothing to do with the coaches as much as it has to do with these agents, because there are no rules in regard to the transfer portal and a kid utilizing it. And it's a constant battle every day to keep your roster intact when you've got agents shopping kids around at school A or B, and they're trying to get them a better deal. They're trying to get them on the field, things of that magnitude, and it's causing some havoc. And that's why we're seeing these schools potentially implementing this year that there'll be no spring game. And if there is one, it's not going to be televised or open to the public other than to the players' moms and dads and family members. And it's because of teams trying to poach players off one man's roster after watching them on television or whatever. So that's another dynamic. April 19th is the scheduled date for the spring game, afternoon game. And we'll have to see if that's something that will continue as scheduled. But who knows what may happen between now and then as it pertains to spring games and how all that works. We'll have to wait and see. But what I want to do now, let's see if I can get over to some of this stuff. Let's see here. There we go. Mm-hmm. Let's see it coming up. Yep, there we go. All right, we're going to talk about Indiana's RPO game this year. A very good part of the offense was this run-pass option, or in some cases, pass-run option, PRO, that was implemented as a pretty big stable of Indiana on first and second down this year. And I want to discuss the play in general and also some of the plays that I've got diagram. We'll see video as well behind it. But, you know, the gist of the RPO, let's see if we can pour this up here, and hopefully everybody can see this okay, is the ability to put the advantage into the offense's hands. Let's see if I can blow this up a little bit. See if it's a little bit better this way. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Okay. So this is a game, Indiana, I think it was against Charlotte. One of these plays is against Charlotte, where Indiana was running this 2-by-2. This was 2 tight ends, or what we would call 21 personnel, 21 being 2 tight ends, 1 running back. So that's what we call 21. Number of tight ends, number of running backs. So what they were doing, and Shanahan did a really good job with the offensive staff, is scheming up teams to get them into a look that they could practice during the week that come Saturday put a lot of confidence in the quarterback's let's move this up a little bit, into the quarterback's mind that he was going to have a lot of success when it came to game day. And so when you run the inside zone, and in this case, when you run it, you essentially, with a tight end blocking, this tight end in this situation, he's going to go out in the, he ends up going out in the flat in this instance. But the tight, when you have a tight end in the game, you've got essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blockers to block the line of scrimmage. So essentially, you've got 6 for 6. And in this situation, because the tight end's blocking, you have no read key. Now, what Indiana did at times is they would read secondary level players. So in this instance, on this particular run that they were running, they were going to read a secondary player. When I ran this type of scheme, we used the term read for down defensive linemen. So read like the end man on line of scrimmage, or anything on the secondary we called book. And then we would tag who we were booking. We would say book X slant, and that was to read the front side backer to the slant side, so forth and so on. So the key on this is the quarterback is looking for this linebacker to get nosy in here, and then for him to throw there or out here in the flat, depending on rotation and stuff. Now, Charlotte was rotating to cover 3 to get to theoretically an 8-man front against a heavy run look with 2 tight ends. So let's see if I can pull this up now. Maybe not. There we go. Come on. Give me a chance. Okay. Let's watch this first one here. Okay. Perfect. So Indiana catches them off guard a little bit here in this aspect of things. And let me move that into a better frame. But this is Horton. Horton's at the top there. At least I think he is. Horton's at the top. That's Horton. I think this is, I don't know if this was Bauman or not, but anyway, this is the gentleman down here, which I think is Coop, is running a slant. He's going to go on the flat, and he's going to come in motion and block here, and he's going to run an outcut at the top. Now, the guy they're reading is him, that backer there. So let me clear all my sketches here, and we'll see how this works and why it's such a great play with everything. And as a matter of fact, I've already got a lot of this pre-drawn here. So the numbers in the box, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the box for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blockers. So got a little bit of a disadvantage, but they're going to a cover 3 look, which is going to open this backside flat, especially if this guy rushes. So let's let it run here. Maybe not. Come on. Let me do this. Clear everything so we can get it to run here. And sometimes it just bogs down enough to make you mad. This thing is. Okay, there we go. And there's the, like I said, here's the pass in behind it, which gave, like I said, the offense the advantage, because no matter what the defense tries to do here, they're in the wrong. And there's a good pass by Curtis, and it's all well and good when it comes to that particular play, being what it is with that slant route. Very simplistic play, nothing too complicated or any of that. It's simple numbers in that instance. He saw the numbers in the box, and at the time that he saw the numbers in the box, he decided to let her eat. And that was the most important thing off of that play, is getting that and getting a huge gain off of it on a first or second down play. This happened to be 2nd and 7. They get a big conversion inside the green zone that ultimately gets them inside the red zone, and they convert, I think, on this series to get a touchdown. So you can see how that can ultimately come into play with everything. Let's go up here to the next drawing here. Same team. Now, again, with this is Horton right here. That's Horton. He's going to come in motion. All right. Now, this time, what they did is they had a pretty good feel that Charlotte was going to go to this 3 deep coverage and void a flat. And what I mean by void a flat, they really don't have a flat defender out here other than this Will linebacker that would have to flash out here into the flat. So good cover 3 beaters, especially into the boundary, are wheel routes. And Shanahan, knowing that in this scenario, made a call with this same play, but this time, this is what you would call an R, or a PRO, and not an RPO. So Curtis is looking for the pass first, run second. And so by that look right there with the back stacked, he's already thinking throw it. He's always got an outlet, because the way he would do this, it'd be 1, 2, and then 3. So he's got somewhere to go with the football in the event that he needs to do that. Okay. So all that in that regard is taken care of with this play. So let's see what I can get with play 2. With this, and see what we got here. And I'm not going to blow this up. I'm just going to try to keep it as simple as possible here. What Indiana did is they would take their 2 tight ends and 21 personnel. They would spread them out to get a look. Now, this would be a good look to run the ball, because there's only 5 guys in the box, and you have your advantages here because of what you have. So what Indiana did is they showed a wide set and came to a condensed set, which probably made Charlotte already start queuing. And you can already start looking at this now and thinking, okay, they're loaded up, cover 3, unless they're going to go true man, it's probably going to be some type of 3 deep. So now he's already thinking, he's got a pre-snap look that I'm going to look wheel post tight end in the flat. And this is what we have here in the PRO. And see, they're already beat. Curtis is already looking to the wheel route. He can't get out of his hands fast enough on this, because that's what he's looking for. He's got the backer cheating up into the line of scrimmage. You've got the rotation, and you have nobody on the tight end. Nobody. Complete blown coverage. Ends up being a big play. all the way down to about the 35, 34-yard line. So simple play, and all of a sudden you're hitting a 37-yard gain. Now, when I said they were spread out, and I said there's a 5-man box here, and if they would have kept them spread out and you were going to do some type of RPO type of concept, anytime you get a 5-man box, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, that is good running numbers for you as an offense, because you would read one of these end blockers and these 5 would have 5. So in that case, it would have been a good run box if you wanted to look at it. Now, when you bring the 2 tight ends in, as you can see, it just makes the picture a little bit more ucky in terms of the run game. And you can see this number 2 right here. If you look at Curtis right here, and you can kind of tell, if you look at what he's doing, he's looking right here at him. I mean, his eyes are right here on that cat, and he already sees him going to do that. So it's a pretty easy thing for him to look at. And when he gets that rotation, boom, he knows it. It's an easy toss and catch to the outside, and away you go for a big play. So you can see what I mean by, the big play apparatus that comes with this type of offense with the RPO. I'm going to go back to it here in a second because there's a couple more to show. But for Indiana, huge on first and second downs, considered quote unquote run downs, where they had these packages built in that would take advantage of what the defense was giving them and what Curtis was seeing in front of him. So it gave them the best of both worlds. If it's a good run look, hand it off, run the football. If it's a situation where you're reading a defender and he does what you're thinking he's going to do that leads to a pass, he throws it. And then the worst case scenario is, when in doubt, you just hand it off. If you're unsure or whatever, hand the football off, line up, play the next play, if that's what it needs to be. But very simplistic approach to this type of offense is doing what they were doing here with these plays, and why they were good in that regard. Indiana was good this year with it for their entire year. Now here's one where they reduce the front, or squeeze the outside, where they're going to bunch these receivers out. This is actually Horton here that we're going to see on tape. Now, again, this is a PRO. And because of the way the box is situated, this would just be regular 11 personnel, 1 tight end, 1 back, 3 wide receivers. And we're going to look to throw the bubble out here to the outside receiver. And what Curtis is looking at here now is that he's got a numbers advantage, because don't count the safeties because they're beyond the depth of counting unless they are up here at linebacker level. You've only got 2 guys in a condensed formation, and you're going to have leverage on them to get out in front and make a block to spring the wide receiver here on this particular RPO. And let's go and see. That should be clip 3. Again, they did a lot of moving around. So here they go, coming this way with everything. And you can kind of see the look right there now. It's a pretty crowded box, but you can see where you've only got 2 defenders and this guy's way deep. So we'll take that one-on-one matchup, because if we can get these 2 blocks, it's 88 out the gate. And this is a great job by both the receiver and the tight end here on these blocks. Horton does a great job by not chasing back inside, because that guy is not going to make the play. Does a great job and gets that block right there that's basically springs it for another 15 to 20 yards down the field. And that was a huge gain for Indiana on this play. And this was a 2nd and 10. Again, efficiency-wise, they didn't do very good on first down, so now they need a 2nd down play that's going to get them back to being 3rd and medium or short, and ultimately they get a first down out of it because of how the defense is playing it and the look. That's just such a great job by Horton. I tell you, this is a guy that Indiana is going to miss next year because he did so much of stuff like this on the perimeter that made a huge difference in their lineup. And unfortunately, he's gone, and that doesn't help Indiana any. So you can't really complain too much, I guess. Let's see here. Let's go down. Okay. Here's another one that Indiana had this year. This is against Nebraska. Again, this is 11 personnel. And this time, the play that was called was a read because Curtis is reading the end man on line. And if this end man line chases, Curtis is going to run the ball. And then if a force player occurs, like this corner that's coming on a blitz, he's going to pitch it out here to this wide receiver because they essentially have 2-on-1. And this is a touchdown against Nebraska. And this is when Nebraska started reeling in this game on this exact play. And this was right before Curtis got hurt, I believe. And so, again, remember, we were saying you're either reading the interior or you're reading secondary level players. So in this one, he's reading in man on the line of scrimmage. Let's see if we can get this up here. All right, here we go. So now you can already see that Nebraska screwed up. They've got 2 guys standing next to each other. And then up here, they got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up on the box. Remember, Curtis is reading that guy off the line of scrimmage. If he comes, then he's going to pull it and run unless a force player comes up, and then he's got a chance to pitch it out here. It's similar to triple option football. I mean, essentially what it is. So let's let this run. And there you go. End crashes. He pulls it. Force player comes. He pitches it out. Good block out on the perimeter. And it turns into a walk-on touchdown because you have the numbers on your opponent. And that's why in this game, Nebraska was just taken advantage of in a numbers concept. So you can see right now, there's no question that this guy is chasing. So that's an easy read for Curtis right there. So he's already thinking pulling it. He sees the corner coming. He knows he's flicking it out there. Touchdown. Now, experienced quarterback, that slows down for him. You know, that with this one, again, it's a numbers situation on how this is all aligning and how it looks, whether he can hand it off or not. Now, this may have been a confusing look. He probably could have thrown it here, but in the midst of it, he thought he had a better chance of running the ball in this situation because of what he has in terms of blocking, because he has a tight end coming across and there's no interior read the way this play is going. It could be a secondary read if you wanted to it, or what we would call book. But in this situation, I believe he ends up handing this off. I think this is against Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this is against Nebraska Steel. And he decides to hand this off, even though he could have thrown it out there. As you can see at the top, there's nothing wrong with that pitcher. Or he could even, if he wanted to stay front side, he could have thrown the speed cut down here to Cooper. But again, when in doubt, let's hand it off. He hands it off to Ellison, who makes a great cut and turns it into 6 points. So you'd say right decision. Curtis, right decision. Now you can see it from this end here. Now, the only thing I would say on this situation for Curtis is he's looking out here for some type of confirmation, but he's got to think that something's up here. So I'm wondering if they would have, he got a touchdown out of it, if he would have said in the meetings about maybe you should have thrown it. Yeah, pick your poison. The defense is always wrong. That's the way I like to think there, Brian, when I'm running the show and calling offense, the defense is always wrong. But I want you to watch another play they're going to miss is Kadik here on the block, because this is pretty darn good. And watching pass this off, he was good there. The right guard's wrong. The right guard should be looking to go into his A gap. He's hanging on that 3 technique way too much. And Kadek's expecting him to be there, but he ends up blocking 2 and does just enough for Ellison to make them all right and score a touchdown. So again, it's a simple concept and some of the ways that you look at it. Here's against Michigan, where they had a lot of success with this in the first half. Again, this time you're in, again, with a tight end like Horton, you could be in 11 personnel, but come out in a multitude of formations. That's what makes it so nice with him. And you look at this situation here, and you think, well, this is more like a 5 box, and I'm thinking I'm going to hand it off rather than throw it. Let's see what happens here. So they change it up. They're changing it up, so they're going to get Williams into a potential situation where they could throw the bubble out here. Let's see what happens now that he changed everything up. Again, 5 in the box equals run. Let's see if he does what I think. Yep. He runs it because the numbers are in their favor. And while these 2 on the outside do a great job of blocking, he decided to hand it off to Ellison, who got 4 yards, which is a good play. I mean, that's a good run play, and you'll get a better look of the box here in a second. This guy, you wouldn't count in the box because he's outside the edge rusher, so that's a 5 bucks. Now, defense are going to say this guy can play the pass or the run, so they're expecting him to do 2 things, and that's awful difficult in that regard. So that's why in this situation, Curtis hands it off and takes advantage of a 5-man box and gets a positive 4 yards gained. Great cut by Ellison. And I tell you what, these Michigan front 4 guys were beast. I mean, they were a tough group to handle up front. And there's no question about that. But I hope I gave you a little bit of an insight into what goes into an RPO game or a PRO game. I know these were, in some cases, simplistic and things of that nature, but overall, it really is a simplistic play. It's about a numbers game, depending on if you're looking to run it. It could be a coverage situation where you're looking at things to throw it, both backed up by a run. But in this instance, it gives the quarterback 2 options. And that's why it's so successful, because in a lot of times it's so clear to the quarterback that he's not wrong. And I could remember in the day where we would teach quarterbacks to look coverage of corners and see how soft they were. And if they were soft, to give the hitch signal to throw the hitch. Well, they hardly ever did it because they were fearful of being wrong. This enables a quarterback to feel like he's making the right decision because of how it's playing out in front of him. Now, it takes some time and preparation to make it work in practice, so you're getting a good look from your scout defense or your own defense for that matter. And the quarterback understands the picture and what he thinks he's going to see. And that's what I thought that Shanahan and Tino did a great job this year of using formations and using Horton in ways to set up plays based upon where they put him. put him tight as a wing, as a wideout, whatever. So it gave a clear picture to Curtis. And I think, let's see here. Brian said, let's hope, whoops. Let me bring it back up there. He says, let's hope Mendoza can run these. I do believe he will be able to. I do not think the RPO game is exclusive to one type of quarterback or another. Curtis being more of a thrower, you saw more throwing type of plays in their RPO game than anything. Mendoza may give you a little bit of both. They may decide that they want to run the quarterback some, and so maybe they'll have some designed quarterback runs in the offense with Mendoza in there, or even Alberto in there as well. So I don't think it is, quarterback specific in terms of what they can or cannot do. Especially at this level. I think a quarterback like Mendoza, who is a very bright, very headsy type of player, will understand the concept and be able to add his dimensions to it in terms of what he can do. But as far as being able to look at a defense, determining what's the best possibility here, like Curtis did, I think he will do it. Now, what Curtis did, that was great. It was very highly effective is, he completed a lot of passes this way. I mean, when you talk about quarterbacks being 60%, 70% type of throwers, you're talking passes in that general vicinity of what we saw on tape here. Now, you did see some throws down the field, but the reality of it is you're talking routes 10 yards or less where he is highly effective, and then he did hit some bigger routes. But for a lot of people that look at the RPO game, they just look at it as an extension of the run, even though you're throwing it, in that regard. I think offensively speaking, that's what Shanahan and Tino did a great job of. Of course, Cignetti would be involved in those discussions as well, but it's pretty much, with Shanahan and Tino this year, well, it's not going to change much, but there's no question that they did a good job of putting their pieces of the puzzle in the best possible position to have success. And that's what it takes, especially for offensive linemen, as you can see in this environment. It helps them out a ton because they're always thinking run and the quarterback may be throwing it. Well, it helps them because now you get defenses guessing. You get defenses guessing, you get them slowing down a bit, things like that. Now, the one thing that I'll say about this type of scheme is when you had a team like Michigan or Ohio State, and in some cases Notre Dame, when they get in your face and they're going to play press man coverage on you, and you're going to still do these things, it's imperative that the wide receiver wins the line of scrimmage. So they have to win that battle at the line of scrimmage to get open. And if they can't do that consistently, it pretty much puts this in a bad scenario, because if you're looking to throw it and your wideout's not winning that release at the point of attack, it's a sack, it's a bad throw, it's an interception, whatever you want to think of it. But that's the key component here. So when they get up in your face, you got to win the line of scrimmage. And when Michigan did that in the second half to Indiana, they didn't have as many of these called. And Ohio State, they didn't have many of these called. And in some respects against Notre Dame, they didn't have a lot of these called. So they're going to have to figure what that next step is. Now with Curtis, he couldn't run the ball. So the next step is to find ways to run quarterback runs in those scenarios that you're looking to throw it. So you'd have quarterback reads and quarterback power and quarterback count, things like that, and speed sweeps and so forth and so on. Well, Curtis couldn't do that because of his knee. So he was very limited in what they could and couldn't do. And you could see where that kind of gave him a little bit of a handicap when they went up against the top tier teams, and the only thing they could do is try to throw 50-50 balls on the outside, and that's not a great ratio to get into against superior talented teams. It's just not a winning formula. And then you've got to find ways to beat those type of coverages and get open. And at the same time, you got to find ways to run the football. And when you're not running it very well and you're not being able to do some of the things that you did throughout the year that you hung your hat on, it can end up in a very long day. So those will be some of the things that Indiana will have to progress on in those scenarios where they found themselves handicapped by a defense and what they did to them that took them out of that type of play in that type of game, because that's when Indiana became very vanilla and defenses started teeing up on them. So I appreciate you guys joining me here this evening, and those that join me at a later time. I want to thank Quick Cut Sports Analysis Software for their generosity in joining as a sponsor of the Hoosier Football Tailgate and the utilization of their system. Much appreciated with that. I do look to bring more information like this to the show as we wait between now and spring football to start. And if there's something out there that you would like to know more about that Indiana did this year, go ahead and hit me up on X at Hoosier Tailgate 55 or Coach Griff 55 on X, and let me know what that is that you might think you'd like to learn more about. And I'm going to keep continuing doing some of this as we break down the Hoosiers offense from this last year and why they were so effective in what they did. And with the RPO game and the PRO game, as you can see, they had a lot of positive plays, very few negatives, even though I only showed you like 7 plays out of all of them. I think they ran it somewhere in around 30 or 40 times. They only had, I think, 2 or 3 negative plays throughout the year with this scheme. So very, 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 very productive for Indiana this last season. Again, thanks for joining me here tonight on the Hoosier Football Tailgate. I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith. We'll see you the next time right here on Believe.